Beauty from the Shelf is a podcast where industry experts fill in the gaps that are integral to growth for early-stage beauty founders. Today is another episode where we are going to dive into insights. Insights help brands understand what the consumer wants. And since the consumer is making the purchasing decision, insights can help you and your brand carve out your specific niche to deliver on what that consumer wants. In this episode, I discuss hair care insights with Meagan of the Emerson Group.
The most important piece I would say for a new brand is to establish your identity first. What do you want to stand for? Where do you want to fall within each of these trends happening or this white space, whatever it is? And then lead with that in every single aspect of your marketing, your branding, your packaging, and your innovation.
Let's talk a little bit more about Meagan. Meagan started her career working in procurement at a bakery. She then got an opportunity to work for a startup beverage company called Bai. After a few acquisitions at the beverage company, she joined the Emerson Group, and she's been here for a little over 3 years. Meagan has spent her time at the Emerson Group on the Insights team, covering the categories of baby, personal care, hair care, cosmetics, menstruation, and sexual health. Meagan and I talk about the growth outlook for the hair care category. We talk about what things brands can do to own their own identity. And we also talk a lot about wellness and how that is impacting the overall beauty industry. I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. Let's get into this episode. So the first question that I have, as you said, you work in insights for Emerson, and let's say there are beauty brands that are out there that don't understand what insights are. So first, I'd love for you to just share what are insights, and then the next question is how can insights help these early stage brands?
Right. So insights, that's so broad. It's a tough thing to kind of narrow down, but essentially the importance of insights is it tells a story, right? And it tells you as far as where consumers have been, where they currently are, and where you think that they're going to be going based off of, what's happening in the world, based off of all these different kind of economic situations and things like that. And so it's really helpful for a new brand to understand that. Not only does that allow you to kind of figure out, okay, what is my brand identity going to be, right? Where do I want to fit into where all these different shifts are coming in and consumer mindset? Where do I want to fit in with there? Then also identifying where there's a white space and that need state that is not necessarily being met currently. So that's really the great thing about insights is that it kind of gives you that high level of, okay, what do I want to stand for and who do I want to speak to?
That's awesome. And if early stage brands are still looking at, identifying their consumer, what are some specific examples of how that can help them? I know you touched on it a little bit, but wonder if you can expand on that a little bit.
So a great example of that is, we'll talk about hair care, where previously, even not too far before COVID, it really was kind of this mainstream, one size fits all, really not speaking to anybody specifically, not getting into the weeds as far as, different hair types and textures and things like that. And so really with this kind of growing understanding, education, awareness around how there's been so many underserved, consumers and need states that, it has expanded and really innovation has tapped into that, right? And so now it's created this super successful, huge segment that is really talking to consumers specifically about their hair textures. The great thing about how this has kind of evolved is that it opens up doors to really connect with people and really kind of resonate with them because you're actually speaking to what their specific need is. So that's kind of a great example as far as like how things have evolved. And again, a lot of that was accelerated by COVID and different things happened there. So those are the outside factors that are now affecting how consumers are going to market, what they're looking for, and then, again, helping to identify that white space.
Thank you. That was really, really helpful. I know you talked a little bit about insights and you talked about that being obviously this is where you work. So you have access to data, I assume,
Yes.
right?
Very fortunate to have lots of access to data.
And my assumption is that that data, I think if you didn't know, right, the data costs money. And I know that many early stage brands, as they are figuring out their focus and where their money goes, many times money doesn't necessarily go towards data or those
Yeah.
insights. Do you have any tips on how brands, brand founders, marketing individuals can search for these insights if they don't have the budget? Like, can you Google things to find good insights or is it internet stalking? What does that look like?
No, absolutely. And it's actually a really good point because since I've started working at Emerson, I'm just so fortunate to have so much access to information. But you're right, it is incredibly expensive. And coming from when I worked at Buy, which was the complete opposite, basically you had to like sell your first child to get any kind of insights and things like that. And so the great thing about the internet is that stalk away. Google will be your best friend. And really, kind of things that I've done, even now at Emerson, having all this robust information, I also really, though, want to know, like, expand my breadth as much as I can. So, whether it's cosmetic design and subscribing to them, where they offer these free articles and different trends and things like that, packaging trends, all that stuff, going on to different TED Talks or things like that, expanding listening to what people are talking about and hearing their perspective on it, listening to earnings calls, right, from like an Ulta or things like that. There are just so many different avenues that are available to you at your fingertips that you're able to get a full picture without actually having to pay for the $1 million types of contracts and things like that. So there is a plethora of things out there that you have access to just through searching.
That's really awesome. And I think some of those things, cosmetic design, I'd never heard of that. So thanks for sharing that. I know I'm a fan of stalking these internets and TED Talks and podcasts, like hopefully this one and all of that. And earnings calls are really great ways too to really understand what a lot of retailers are doing, especially. I know I'll
Mm-hmm.
listen in and they'll talk about those big initiatives. They'll even highlight in some cases what brands are driving growth in the different categories. And so then you can take that information and,
Yep.
research the brands and you have some
Mm-hmm.
benchmarks. So that's awesome. Would love to transition and talk a little bit about hair care, your area of expertise and insights. Your hair looks great, by the way. Just
Oh,
want to
thank you.
say,
You too.
thanks.
Appreciate it.
Not that those listening can see, but, it's a good comment.
I did wash it today, so.
I didn't. I did it. I'm not a
Mhm.
daily washer, but it's okay. I'd love if you could share what are some key trends that you're seeing in hair care?
Good question. So the macro trends that we're kind of seeing in hair care, I feel like now the way that this space, especially within beauty, has evolved is that there's so many lines that are blurred. So a lot of the trends that we're seeing that are driving innovation and things like that within hair care, it's very similar to skincare, a lot of it cosmetics, things like that. So that's the great thing is that these overarching themes, you really can apply them to a lot of different categories. And so, what really kind of the biggest themes that we're seeing within hair care is first inclusivity, right? And that evolution of first it was talking about multicultural hair types, right? And now it has evolved to all inclusive. So, we're talking about speaking to gender, speaking to ethnicity, speaking to age, accessibility or disabilities, things like that. So, it really is exciting because this great thing that has started because there was such an unmet need has now evolved into it really is speaking to everybody, which I think is just so exciting and again leaves so much room for creativity and people to come in and really feel like they're being spoken to. So that's one of the biggest ones. And then next, I would say is the scalp health trend or skinification of the scalp. And again, this really plays hand in hand with skincare. And even now, we're seeing a little bit more of it in cosmetics as well, right? And a lot of that is driven by, during COVID, people were just doing everything they possibly could to prevent getting sick, so that holistic kind of wellness, and realize that, your scalp is actually a, very vulnerable point of contact for allowing a lot of things in to your body. And you don't necessarily think that way, right? So again, with just kind of more education, more people talking about it, more things coming out, that has really led to this whole scalp health revolution. And, there's just so much room for growth here. I mean, it's a major topic, it's a major buzzword, but now, it's about different serums and, pre-shampoos and different types of accessories to help, combat all that stuff. So really, I guess the evolution has been addressing a need with dandruff, but now it's about prevention and kind of long-term types of solutions. And so that's kind of really where a lot of that has come from, is now people are taking it serious and they really want to be preventative with, starting with your scalp and then, that holistic hair health type of routine.
I love how we will create words like skinification.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you said it, it just rolled off your tongue. Like you can look it up in Webster's, just skinification of the scalp. It's giving dandruff. It's giving serums. No, but like that makes so much sense. And I think that that's one of those things when we talked about insights where you can potentially say, oh, skinification is something that is new. That's definitely more of a white space area in terms of an insight. There's not a lot out there. And so that could be a great area for new product development, for new product line extension, as you talk about these serums, because I feel like, maybe I need to go get a serum for my hair.
Oh, yeah, I highly recommend it for everyone, just because, again, it's like just the front line. But even kind of to your point as far as the skinification, like when you hear that word, you understand what it means, or you can kind of get there, where that's the biggest thing, right, is education around these new segments. Because people might hear that they need to do it, people might listen and say, okay, this is something I need to do, but not necessarily understanding what exactly they need to do or what it means. So again, that's the other piece too, is that like when these new emerging segments are evolving, education is the biggest piece to success. So having those kind of terms or words that really kind of continue to resonate and make it easy for people to digest, that is a game changer and like will give you, endless amounts of success with that.
Are there any other categories? I know you talked inclusivity, you talked skinification. Are there any others?
So I would say that there's really two more pillars that are kind of the biggest things. Anybody who's heard me talk, sustainability, if I never say that word again, I am fine. And it's not because I don't completely 100% agree in what it's doing and where we need to go, but it's just been so overused that it doesn't resonate anymore. That's just a check mark now, And so what I'm finding is that sustainability is a huge platform, but now it's kind of moved to the responsibility piece, right? Where it's gone deeper and it's kind of table stakes at this point, where you should have some type of long-term plan for, carbon neutral footprint, or you should have some type of recycling platform or something that you are invested in as far as helping with these types of sustainability initiatives. But now it's becoming about responsibility. So you'll see brands out there that are giving complete transparency from how their products are harvested, how ingredients are processed, what that whole manufacturing process looks like, and then, from distribution to getting on shelf and what that packaging is. And so that really has kind of now become what the new sustainability is. It's not just about being sustainable, it's about being responsible. To me, that's exciting because it's such an important trend, but, needed to kind of get some new, I would say, excitement into it because people just stopped hearing that word. So now, again, it's sustainability to responsibility. And then the last biggest pillar we're seeing is, the whole clean movement, falling within natural, all these things. I mean, you have the Credos of the world who have really done a great job as far as segmenting that out. And again, education, right? Because these words aren't necessarily very clear to understand like what that means or, what's the criteria to meet that. And so Clean has really become something that is booming. You see it everywhere. But it's also kind of evolved into this, and again, it's because of the confusion. People don't necessarily trust or understand. They'll come out and say that something was clean, and then later, there's a lawsuit saying that it wasn't, and it had this harmful ingredient in it. So people now really are they're confused and they don't trust. So that has really kind of led to the science-backed movement, right? Where people are okay with having something that is manufactured because first and foremost, they want to know and believe that what they're using is going to be okay for them. And so having those types of clinical studies and having it, backed by different dermatologists or, people within the medical field, things like that, that now is really resonating and has created a space for, chemicals don't necessarily have to be bad for you. And this is why, this is the need that it's serving. So that's kind of interesting too, as far as like how, again, there's still definitely a huge space and spot for clean ingredients, but consumers are now more open to, things that have like not necessarily things you would eat in your daily life to put on your hair, but the fact that it's been pressure tested and has been built by science.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious because you talked about kind of 4 big ideas, right? If new brands, or for those that might be listening, right? If they hear these things, do insights work where it's like you need to capitalize on all of the things? Or is it okay to hone in on 1, hone in on 2? Like, are there rules to this where it's like you should be going after all of them? Does it depend on the brand size? Like, what would you say to that? Because you talked about a lot of really awesome things. Do you have to do all of them?
I love that you asked that question because I think that, especially in the role that I'm in, when we're kind of meeting with new brands and things like that, I think it hurts a brand if they are trying to be everything to everybody. Because people get confused, right? They don't understand which piece of this is the more important piece. And with so many products available, beauty is already paralyzing in itself. And so, trying to be everything to everybody, it's going to end up working against you. And, it also doesn't need to be that way because the way that beauty has evolved as a whole, there are these specific niche states that will flourish. And so the most important piece I would say for a new brand is to establish your identity first. What do you want to stand for? Where do you want to fall within each of these trends happening or this white space, whatever it is? And then lead with that in every single aspect of your marketing, your branding, your packaging, and your innovation, right? Because again, once a consumer knows that you do something really well and it's very clear to them what you're going to do, then that's the easiest way to build loyalty. So I would say it's better to be more specific and really own the identity that your brand wants to play versus trying to be everything to everybody, because then it just becomes confusing.
That was really, really great advice because I think it can be easy to try to be everything to everyone. Like, no, we want all the consumers, all the things. But in reality, it's like, especially with so many brands these days, it's better to just hone in and be like, I'm going to be really good at like a red lip, or I'm going to be really good at like a vitamin C serum, whatever the thing is. And then, you build off of that. I love that.
Yeah. I think the other thing too that comes along with that as well is the authenticity of it, and how as a person, as a human being, we kind of will probably question if somebody's trying to be everything to everybody, And so just naturally, when you see a brand that is just staying in their lane for certain things and like this is what they just are continuously being consistent about, that does help, provide authenticity. And I would say for me as a consumer myself, some trust, that they're consistent with all the things that they're trying to do and they're not trying to play these different hats that don't really make sense.
You talked about some big stories, right? Some of the big trends: inclusivity, skinification, sustainability, kind of like clean, but, make it work, right? Like it needs to be those things. We also talked a little bit about finding trends yourself. So I'm wondering, let's say there are brands who have found an insight or they're trying to figure out, like, how do we kind of figure out our story? Can you talk about how you go about developing your story? Like, are you, reading articles? Do you have a process to it? I guess is what I'm saying. And if there is a process, can you share all of your secrets? And then if not, how could a brand go about assessing a category potentially as you do and looking for insights to essentially help them come up with something to help them with new product development or their
Yeah.
identity?
Well, I would say as far as like when I'm building more specific to like a category story where if I'm going to, be talking to a brand or a retailer and, what that process looks like, it's, first kind of seeing what the size of the prize is, right? So is this a category that is projected to grow? What is the potential for it? Where is it at currently? Is it kind of declining and people are moving away from it? Things like that. So it's, I think, first kind of just getting an overall sense of, all right, what's working within, for instance, hair care and what's kind of on its way out. And so then from there, you can kind of then overlay those macro trends that we talked about. So, all right, what is the mindset of the consumer that is shopping in this aisle? And, what are the different levers that they're looking for that you want to play in, that you might want to pull, all this different stuff. So it's first kind of understanding the category, and then it's also understanding some of the shopper and where their mind is. And then from there, it's kind of just picking out, well, what's the best in class here? What are the brands that really stand out? Or what are some of the retailers doing that have really been able to capitalize on some of these different trends? Sometimes it's just about being a consumer, right? And going into the market, which is dangerous for me because I will never leave empty-handed. But, sometimes it's just about going out there and being a shopper and kind of seeing, like, touching and feeling and going into an aisle that you think potentially you might want to innovate in or you might want to get into, and just look at it as a consumer and see what stands out to you, see what is confusing to you, see where you think, oh, this actually isn't available here. So, that's another piece of it too. And then, you kind of just evolve from there, right? Where you can have all the data in the world, but at the end of the day, you need to kind of go with trust your gut, I guess I would say, as far as when you're building a brand, and use all these insights and this information as a way to kind of just, make you informed, but, also have fun with it and be creative and believe in it, because that's going to be the thing that resonates most, especially when you're, talking to buyers or with your messaging to consumers. If they feel that passion and that connection, then, that's going to always be at the forefront of connecting with the consumer.
Meagan just dropped another gem, and we love to hear it. Love it.
Good.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about hair care. One of the other categories that you talked about in the beginning that you manage is wellness. And wellness has become this huge umbrella of categories that references so many things and is very much tied into beauty. I'd love for you to just talk about how is wellness becoming, we talk about it being a trend. I kind of hate to say that because I think wellness is more so becoming a part of our everyday life, but we'll see if, is just a trend or if it's here to stay. But also just would love to understand how this new wellness lens can help early stage beauty brands.
Yeah, wellness. I mean, it can mean so many different things to so many different people. The thing about wellness is that I think it really kind of started before COVID, but accelerated just because people were so tapped out, right? They were just, nobody had time for anything. People were just running on fumes. And then, COVID hits and it's like, wow, okay, I'm good. I'm rested. I need to get back out there. But it kind of shifted this mindset of not wanting to allow yourself to get to that point again, and not let yourself be depleted. So figure out how to include some you time, whether it's something small, but it just goes to making you feel like, okay, I did something for myself that made me feel good, right? So that's really, I think, the heart of it as far as wellness and this kind of wellness trend. And what has kind of evolved from that now is that these traditional categories, right, where it was very specific OTC or very specific beauty, it's all blurred now. And one kind of can fall into the other, which really opens up so much room for brands to have such a bigger message, right? Than just if you come in with hair care, you have to stay in hair care. You know, if you come in with vitamins, you have to stay in vitamins. This whole wellness theme has really made it so much bigger now, where you can speak to need states versus, you know, specific categories. And so it's just the lines are continuing to blur. And I mean, for instance, you would think traditional beauty is like cosmetics, hair care, skincare. And now it's become, you know, menstrual care is a part of wellness, and sexual wellness is, you know, falling within that. And you're seeing, like, you know, those types of things within Ulta. So
Menopause.
yes, menopause. Oh man, don't even, I'm very passionate about that. So that's the thing, is that it's really speaking to the heart of people. And the wellness is about, you know, again, being preventative, proactive, how you can kind of make yourself feel good. But I think it also extends into, it's helped to break a lot of stigmas, you know, and it's helped to make people feel more comfortable talking about things that weren't necessarily talked about. And so that whole mental piece of it also falls within to wellness as well. But I would say this whole wellness space is something that's just beyond category specific, you know, and is really speaking to just people and their needs, and how that can cross every line. So you don't need to stay in your lane for some things, you know?
I think you addressed it quite well, and that's a great way, again, for brands to think about how a category or how a trend, or, you know, to your point, our life experiences, right? Going through a global pandemic that changed life for many people,
Yeah.
everyone, right? It just
Mhm.
changed things. And so when that happens, right, that's a consumer result, if you want to say, like a change in behavior.
Yeah.
Now that means that there's going to be potentially an opportunity for new products, if you will, or just new patterns, new habits. Now I'm going to take time for myself by any means necessary, because I know tomorrow's not promised, or because I know that this is what's good for me. This is good for everyone else around me, you know,
Yeah.
all of those things. So I think
Yep.
that was really helpful. I realized too that in our conversation, we've been talking a lot about categories, but I also want to acknowledge that many early stage beauty brands might have really fantastic ideas, but not have a lot of familiarity with retail terminology. And so I know we've talked about insights and we've talked a lot about category, but I didn't even think to just, you know, reset and kind of ask you to explain, like, can you talk about, you know, how retailers look at categories and how that kind of informs, you know, product and decision, and what category informs, like, you know, can you just talk to that? Because I think that might help tie everything together.
Essentially, the great thing about insights, kind of starting from where we were, is that you can see how things were, you can see how things are, and then you can kind of try to predict where it's going to be going. And so before online, before e-commerce, it was all about these very specific categories. You fall within a certain aisle, and this is where you're going to sit to play, and you're stuck where you are. And now, you know, with the entrance of e-commerce and Amazon and all these things, it has completely freed up these very static types of categories that we're used to, especially within retail. And so that, I think, has really created a huge opportunity for brands, because it now allows you to, especially online, right, which is where I would suggest everybody, you know, starts first, because you can get so much information and gain so many learnings from that, because it removes any kind of handcuffs that you have, you know, and you can play wherever you want to play. And so I think that the great thing about online is that it allows brands to speak to need states versus feeling like they need to fall within a certain category. Because once you kind of identify within a certain category, it becomes harder for you to kind of branch out and do different things. Where from the start, if you kind of say that I am going to be somebody that, you know, is solving for a certain physical need, right? Then that means that that person is focused on or knows and identifies that this brand is going to, whatever they say that they're going to solve for, that I trust in that brand. And so whether that falls within hair care, whether that falls within wound care, whatever. So it really kind of allows you to take the cuffs off, like I said, and not have to fall within these strict categories. And so it's different within retail, right? Where if it was Amazon search terms in the store, nobody would be able to get anywhere. Like it would just be a mess. So there is a rhyme and reason for why these categories are set up. But I think retail is kind of in this transition as well, where they're trying to not have it be so solidified and specific, right? And so that's why you'll see certain kind of end caps or, building out types of things that are for sleep or for immunity, which, kind of covers a lot of different categories. So I think that retail is doing the best that they can to kind of evolve and not necessarily be so strict for traditional categories. But, online, you can really kind of be whatever you want to be. So I would say try to hold off as long as you can on saying that you're a specific category and more talk about your identity, what your brand is going to do, and then, kind of grow from there.
Thanks. And so for anyone who is listening, who is like category, think of category as like the filter on the navigation sidebar that allows you to select what you're looking for. Are you looking for cough cold? Are you looking for skincare? Are you looking for face serums? Are you looking for, hair care? And then as you were referencing retail, you were referencing brick and mortar specifically because those categories, as you shared, are almost their navigation. That's what we called them when I worked at Target. They're ways to navigate where you go when you're shopping the store, because to your point, we can't just search, face serum, vitamin C face serum at Target and know where to go. So that's why they have the category, a face serum should be somewhere in skincare, which is going to be near body care or personal care. And so that's that navigation in real life.
Yes. That's a very good way of putting it. It's almost like your map.
Yes, it is your map. I've had many a conversation with my in-store teams and asking them for more signs. And they're like, the consumer doesn't look there. We're not going to do that. Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, those are really all of the questions that I had. And I think we covered a lot. I think that there's a lot in there that will be really helpful. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you feel would be helpful that you want to share?
I don't know. I think that you hit on all the biggest pieces. I think the thing for me that, if I was speaking to a new brand or a new startup is really take the time to carve out the identity that you want to have for your brand. And again, be consistent. People can see, they will either be attracted to it or deterred from it kind of thing. So just to be consistent with who you are across all those things. And like I said before, also hold off on kind of pigeonholing yourself into one specific category. Leave those doors open for you to explore and expand, because these lines between OTC and beauty and everything, they're continuing to blur. And that's going to be happening for the foreseeable future. So allow yourself that breath to be able to kind of play in whatever space you want to play in without, people just identifying your brand as, no, you're a hair care brand. That doesn't make sense. Or you're have your messaging be more towards, I am solving for this specific problem. And then, you can kind of go from there. So that's just, the things that I've seen and kind of taken away from the different experiences that I've had. And then also talking through some of the new brands that we've had coming into Emerson and some of those takeaways.
Thank you again to Meagan from the Emerson Group for joining me on this episode today. I really do love to sit down with the Insights folks because they know so much about these categories. I loved hearing the insights about what specifically is driving growth in hair care. I also loved Meagan's talk about how brands can really differentiate themselves by owning their identity. She told you guys to get after it. I also really loved our conversation about how the beauty category is blurring and how wellness is really expanding our definition of beauty. This should certainly be encouraging to all of you brands listening out there, as this really opens the door to what categories you can incorporate in your product offering. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. I encourage you to share with a colleague and to leave us a review. Until next time, catch you later.